Awesome. 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 So, hi everyone. Once again, today we will be looking at database security. We'll be looking at some of the methods that you're gonna that you can use to bypass, and also how to protect yourself from some of these security flaws. Again, my name is Francis Kipchumba, and pleasure to meet all of you. Some of the session's expectations: um, use the chat box to ask questions. I love a very interactive session. If you have any question, clarification, use the chat box. If you are not speaking, ensure that you're muted, mute yourself. And other sessions expectations will be, be present, be critical, be curious, ask questions. All right, cool. So who is this guy? Watu wanasema Francis Cybersecurity, you know, who is this guy? So um, ideally, Francis is a problem solver, who is a software engineer and also a cybersecurity champion. Um, I love to use technology to elevate, the African content, to improve their living standards, and I also like mentoring and fostering new generation of tech talent. Um, I have a lot of passions and hobbies, but most of the time, I'm a very curious individual. I like to learn. I like to explore. See what's going on. Catch a drift of upcoming technologies. See how people are solving problems in the world. I love space, and I love how NASA is actually, using technology to problem solve. It's a very inspirational story. Yeah. So apart from tech, also a nature enthusiast. I like to enjoy the nature, the beauty of Mother Nature. I like to do some hiking and any adrenaline activity. Um, Apart from that, I'm also interested in farming, in doing agribusiness, traveling, maybe. My retirement plan will be revolving around there. But who knows? About to find out, in 10, 20 years. Um, a disclaimer before we begin. So, cybersecurity has a lot of restrictions. It has a lot of, um, laws governing around it. So, just a disclaimer: everything that we will go through today is just for learning purposes only. Um, don't misuse the skills that you have. All the demos that will be conducted is controlled, and we have express permission to test against them. On your own time, remember to always ask for express permission before doing any penetration testing. So any kind of scan or test against a system, you need to have express permission from the owners to avoid some of the legal battles that might arise. All right. So today, our session's objective will revolve around four things. We will be looking at how database works, so that we can, for you to understand how the database will work, it is crucial to understand how websites work. So we'll look at the websites behind the scenes, how they interact. We'll also talk about the databases, how data is stored, how data is retrieved, and how data is used on a day-to-day, normal website interaction. We'll then look at some of the security vulnerabilities that we will talk about, how we can attack, how we can bypass them, and then lastly, we'll see how we can prevent ourselves from some of these attacks. All right, cool. So I'll be closing my camera. I know you guys understand, we there's an internet outage at the moment. So since I'll be using a lot of browser, it might lag. So I'll be closing my camera for a moment. Yeah, right. So how websites work. Um, websites are the website technology is a very interesting concept. It is very crude and fundamental if you think about it behind the scenes, but due to abstraction, it has made it very seamless. Everything works. When you want to open a page, you just go to your browser, type the address that you want to go to, YouTube, Gmail, and you press enter, magic happens, and you're able to view some content. That process, there's a lot of processes behind, all those actions that is abstracted to us normal users, and they're very crucial. So ideally, when we talk about websites, it's a combination of a lot of these processes and things combined together to make it a very seamless process. Um, Our web architecture is usually divided into three. So for it to make a full, when you talk about a website, it has different things that work seamlessly together to give you that one experience. Um, so we usually have the front end. So the front end, this is the visual part, the what exactly you're using at the moment is the front end or the website. So the website gives you the visual application, the visual landscape of how the site will look like. In a moment after this, we'll look at some of the technologies that goes around making a website. Um, so we have a website. The website is the front end part. It is the visual part, normally called the front end. So your phone can be a front end. The browser is a front end as it allows you to interact with data and other things in the internet. And then after website, we usually have a server. A server is basically an external computer that holds data per se. And this external computer is hosted, rather is deployed somewhere in a data center, and it is the one that is responsible for giving you, for example, if you want to open your email, it is the one responsible for fetching all your emails. It is the one responsible for fetching maybe images, data that is related to you, or that the one data that you have personally specifically requested. So there is one that delivers the data from, it will go to the database, um, get the data that you want, package it well nicely, and then send it to the front end of the website. And then if there's any data that is needed from the web from the front end, the server again will take the request, perform the needed computation of data fetching, and then return it back to the user on the front end. The last part is the database. So database is where now data is stored. So when we talk about database, think about database as a storage place, like a library, whereby you have a lot of data that you have stored. You have your documents, you have your images, you have, you know, files and folders, everywhere arranged. If you want to fetch your documents, you go to the database, ask it to fetch for you all the documents that, you can be as specific as possible, you can be as broad as possible, and it will always return for you some data. That is if that data is found in the database. So database involve storing data, organizing, and processing of data. In a normal architecture, database is usually stored inside a server, but it's not necessarily, because you'll find in some other instances, the server is itself, and then the database is also, in a different place. Currently now with the internet, most of these, you'll find they're in different regions. Their servers are in different region. The website is hosted on a different region. For example, front end can be hosted in Europe. The servers and the database may be US. There are all these different regions, servers, that allows this communication to happen seamlessly, to happen very fast. Right now, the East African cable that connects internet to East Africa is broken. So you'll find that traffic is a bit minimum. It is controlled so that everyone can have access to the same services or bandwidth. Cool. So in the next section, we are going to look at what the front end. We've talked about the front end. Front end is what we use to display the data. We look at some of the technologies that are used to build the front end and how they connect with the whole website architecture. Um, Normal all websites, so long as they're using a browser, will have several technologies, assisting it. The first one is HTML. We'll talk about what HTML is in a moment. And then we have the CSS, the JavaScript, and the server-side scripting. So ideally, all these languages or technologies work together in order to give you that good visual experience, that you can be able to interact with on your website or on your browser. So HTML is the language of markup that allows the website to look the way it looks. It is the one that provides structure. So think of an HTML more like the frames of a building or the frames of a car, that defines the structure of the website. So if a website has an image, if the website has a form, if the website has several lists, all these are usually defined using the HTML, right? A good example that you can use, or think of HTML, or the whole architecture as a restaurant. So normally when you go to a restaurant, you'll first, interact with the menu. So the menu is the front end. And then once you have decided what you're going to take, a waiter or a server will come and take your order. So that usually works as a server because they'll take the request, and then the database will be the chef. So the chef will take your request, do some magic to it, add some fire, some spices here and there, and gives you a meal, right? Yeah. So also the architecture for for the web usually works something similar to that. So we have the HTML. Think of HTML as the structure, the chairs, how the restaurant is laid out, how far are the chairs, how far are the tables, you know, um, basically the structure of the website. So HTML is responsible for that. I'll show you guys in a moment how an HTML looks like, how the CSS will look like, JavaScript, and all. So once you have your structure already set, so you have all the elements that you want in your website, then you move on to do some stylings. We style using CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it usually adds the design elements, so colors, the fonts, decorations here and there. In our website scenario, the CSS will be more like how the decor of the restaurant is set. So when you have some flowers, the color themes, um, the what else? Ceiling, windows. That is styling. Yes. HTML, CSS, they usually work together. So you style, you have your structure, and then you come and design and add some more juice to your structure using CSS. Another very important technology that works with a website is JavaScript. JavaScript usually adds interactivity to the website. So maybe I know you have come across a website that has, moving things. You can see some mouse, you can see some animations moving on the site. That is achieved using JavaScript. It adds interaction to the website to make it, much easier to interact with the website. It gives it more of a lively feeling. In our restaurant analogy, think of JavaScript as adding, things like music in the background to the restaurant. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, it forms the front end part of the website architecture. Last but not least, we have the server-side scripting, which is responsible for now performing and handling all the logical processing of data. So fetching, storing, doing some computation, comparing if this indeed is data that we have stored, and all that is done by the server side scripting. Um, some server side scripting technologies that are around there. We have Python, we have Ruby, PHP, Java, you name them, you name them. And in Moringa, by the way, we also offer courses that will take you, through some of these technologies. And by the end of those courses, you will be able to create your own website. You'll be able to build your own interactive website that you can be able to showcase and put it out there and let it earn you some money. Right. Communication mode. As I'd shown before, the architecture is usually divided into the different um, levels. So the website, the server, and the database. And for all these, they usually communicate together so that data can be transferred. And the communication methods they use is status codes. All right, don't really panic about it. Status codes, these are communication methods that computers use to ensure that communication and data is moving between one point to another seamlessly. These communication modes are divided majorly into three important parts. Not They are not the only status codes. There's also another one, but these are the ones that are majorly used. So they're usually divided into around four bands. We have the 200s, 300s, 400s, and the 500s. Each of these status code has um, they have a meaning, or they have a representation of what they mean. So if you're working with a server and then you see a 200, it has its own meaning. You have a 201, has a meaning on its own, for 400s, for 500s as well. So the common ones, as I've mentioned, are the 200, 400s, and 500s. So 200s are usually meant for success communication. So when you want to open your server, or maybe your Gmail, you make a request, go to Gmail, log in, and then it will display. During that time, there'll be a lot of communication between your machine and where the Google servers are located, just to ensure that you have the correct person. We are displaying exactly what the user wants, and there is no any interference or an error in between. And most of the time, they'll be using 200s, which means okay. For authentication, you'll have to, not authentication. If you are adding a new data to your database, have 201. Yeah, so they all just mean that the request was successfully completed, and everything is okay. Another status code communication is the 400s. So these usually represent client errors. So in your case, you are the client, right? So when your server, or rather when your machine, your website doesn't make the correct request, or something happens in between, those are usually termed as client errors. And when you talk about client errors, I know the most common one is the page not found, which is 404. So whenever you see a 404, it means that the server did not find that request. So you have to adjust the URL path so that it points to the correct uh, path or endpoint. Unauthorized also, which is 401. When you put in when you try to fill in an authentication form where you needed to log in, and then you put in bad credentials, so they will always result in a 401 unauthorized. All right. So for 500s status code, these are status codes that signify or tell you that there's an error in the servers. So when the server is not available, when there's an issue with the server, for example, if there's a DDoS attack, it will fail with a 500 error. So you'll see a lot of 500s 504 and all. Cool. So they work, all these status codes work together, with the front end to make those requests seamless. Ideally, you want to be able to see them on a day to day. If you want to see them, you can go to your browser, do under the developer settings. Then you can play around there. You'll be able to see those um, status codes as the front end communicates with the back end. All right. So it is crucial to understand how the front end works so that you can also understand how database comes to play. Because database is where we'll be focusing our practical approach for today. And as I mentioned, database is used to store, organize, and process information in a website. It is a very crucial part of this website architecture, as it is the one responsible for storing and handling the data. Before I continue, what are some of the databases you have come across? You know, as you learn, feel free to type them on the chat. Some of the database you know about or you've had. Nice. You can see MySQL, Oracle. Awesome, awesome. Centralized, commercial, distributed, and SQL. Nice, 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 nice. That's very good. So when you talk about a database, I've given an example. Think about database as a library. Yeah. So in this library, you have a lot of records, you have a lot of data that you need to store them. And whenever you want to retrieve something, you'll go to the librarian, ask them, I want this and this and this. And then the librarian can either, tell you to go and it is located here, or, they can also go and fetch for you that specific data. We are going to look at databases. Look at a language that you will use to communicate with the database so that we can get exactly what we want. And then we before we now go to database security, some of the things that we can use to bypass the database security. Yeah, so as I mentioned, database organizes information using tables, more like how cabinets are organized with drawers and drawers and files or papers inside. A database has several tables. So when you talk about a database, you always have it has to have a table. Table is the individual places where data of a specific things are organized. For example, if you have the users table, so all the users who are using that database will be listed under the users table. Also, for payments, all the payments that was done to that website will be listed under the payments table. or maybe if it is the posts. For example, for Facebook, they have a table that contains all the posts, who posted those posts, and any reaction, comments, or that. So, as we've mentioned, a database will have several tables. For example, it will have the users, payments, and the post. And inside each table, they will hold a particular information related to that are role related. So a table will hold data associated with the table, e.g. for users, it will have all the users' information, their first name, last name, email, phone number, and all. And data in a table is organized as columns. So, for example, the first name, last name, phone number, email. I'll show you in a moment how it looks like. And then for each row now we'll have the individual users. So for example, user one will have the first name, will have their last name, an email address, phone number. A second user the same as they go row by row by row by row. We have different types of databases available at the moment. Common examples, we have the MySQL, Postgres SQL, and MongoDB. So database usually majorly categorized into two. We have relational database and we have non-relational database. Relational database will have database that are related to each other. For example, let's say the users and the payments and the post will have a column among them that associates or associates each of those uh, rows together. For non-relational, they don't have that functionality, um, so they can just store any kind of data in their table. I'll not really go dive much into relational and non-relational databases. Right. So now that we have a brief gist of what a database is, the next section we are going to look into the language and technology that we can use to communicate with databases. A basic structure of the language or technology for communicating with the database. So the language is called SQL, which stands for Structured Query Language. So SQL is now the language that the database used to communicate. If you want to fetch books of a certain title, you'll have to structure an SQL with some certain format so that it can be able to fetch for you all the data associated with maybe particular books, particular authors, particular genres, or uh, any kind of um, data or relation that you want. The structure for the SQL usually are very simple. So you have the select, and then what you want. So for example, you want to return all the details of books that starts with letter K, right? For example, so you'll select the star from here means every column in that table. So select everything in that table from so this specify where you want to get data, which table. So from the customers table. What this will do, it will go to the customers table, um, fetch everything inside there, fetch all the columns, and then display it to the user. Right? It's very straightforward. So you select. If you just want maybe the title and the author and the year it was published, you can specify instead of doing the star. You can specify, select first name, publish, or maybe title, the author, and the year of, maybe published from books table. All right. Um, I'll show you in a moment a more practical approach. So this select does fetch everything inside the table, but sometimes we want more precise information. For example, I want to fetch all the customers who come, from Kenya. In such a scenario, I'm going to do a more detailed SQL statement. So I'll still have my select, and then I'm selecting all the columns, the star from customers. So here I'll add another clause, the where, right? So this where now specifies the special condition that I want to add to the SQL statement. So where all the country, so it will go to the country column, and then it will check if for all the customers whereby where the country is Kenya, is going to be returned. So this is important, SQL select from where when you're doing SQL injection, as we're able to bypass some of the restrictive constraints that are put. So let's have a look at the demo part. Confirm if you can see my browser again. So I'm no longer sharing my presentation. Awesome, 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 awesome. So in a typical database, this is how the tables will look like. So you can see we have different table names, customer, categories, employees, order details, product, shippers, supplier. And in each of these tables, there are records. So for example, let's have a look at the customers table. So the table will look something like this. I mentioned about the columns. So the ID, the customer names, the contact address, city, all these are the columns. And then now the individual data are the rows, right? So these are the rows, and then the columns now represent these vertical column. Remember our SQL statement. So this is what is happening. The SQL statement is fetching everything from the customers table and displaying them here, right? I can specify I want all the employees. So select all from employees table. Let's run this query, and then as you can see, it returns all the data under the employee database. I can even be more specific than this. So for example, let's get the first name and the last name from the employee date, and yeah, let's try that. So let's get the first name and the last name of all the employees. Yep. So this returns only the first name and the last name columns from the database. All right. So now that we have seen the statement, let's now do a statement that we can use the where clause. So select, let's have a customer name, and the city from customers, right? So this returns customers and the city. We can be more specific and let's say we want only the customers whose city is Berlin, right? So let's go to our statement. We are going to add a where clause. So this allows us to specify where city equals Berlin. So I'm putting it as a string. So that means it's gonna go through all these lists and then it checks where the city equals to Berlin, and that will be the only data that will be returned. Let's run that statement. So only one city, only one customer is from Berlin. Let's search for Mexico. Yeah, Mexico had two. Uh, Let me check again. We have London. Let's say London. City is London. Yes, as you can see now, it has returned all the customers from the customers table whose city is listed as London. Um, these commands are usually very important, especially when we talk about database security. Whenever you are required to log in, something similar usually happens behind the scene. So, when you see a username, enter your username, enter your password. The database usually goes and check. So select data from the customers table where the username is, and then it will take the value that you have um, inputted under the username or email input, and also where the password is, and it will take the value of the password and then compare. If they both match, then that means you are the correct person, and it's going to allow you to continue to log into the website. So remember this as we will be talking about it once we are doing the SQL injection. So going back to my presentation, we have seen SQL. We have an idea of how the database communicates, how you can be able to manipulate your database so that you can, um, perform um, perform some data processing, data aggregation. It is very powerful. It's a very powerful language. We don't really have much time to talk in much depth about SQL, but if you have time, kindly have a look at it. It is a very interesting language, and I'm sure you're gonna, you know, enjoy interacting with it. So far we have understood how websites works behind the scenes. We understand how the website links with the database, and database is the store of all our information. So it is a very important part in the internet and in the web uh, ecosystem. For the next part, we are looking at three. These are not all the ways that you can bypass web database security, but we'll look at a few things. We'll look at social engineering. We'll have a look at what is it called? SQL injection. And then we'll also be looking at brute force. So SQL injection and brute force will be using tools to do it. And then for social engineering, I'll just show you guys a few pages of how social engineering works, and how you can be able to quickly identify some of the ways for social engineering parts. So some of the exploits. Um, we have talked about, the first one being social engineering. So social engineering is where attackers trick people into giving up the information by clicking on malicious link, or making you download some certain documents or files which will breach your information, and they'll be able to access your data. A common a common term, for example, or a common scenario. Imagine you're playing a game online, or you're just browsing your social media, and then you get a message, that you have won something, or your character just won a rare, collectible, or someone shares an image, claiming that is this you. So they usually trick you into revealing the information, and then what they do is they try to make it a very personal, very emotional, as it will touch on your emotional side, so that you can be able to, click the link without really putting much thought into it. And most of the time, they'll let you know that for you to get those reward, you have to do something. You have to click on a link, you have to view it, you have to go log in somewhere. Um, yeah. The common, this is known as phishing. Um, whereby people make you to click on a suspicious link that are sent from the email. They could, imitate or try to imitate your HR, your colleague, um, tech support, customer service, you know, and they'll always have a very emotional or maybe action oriented. Your account has been hacked. There's some suspicious login from a certain computer, and you have to verify if that was you. No. So the trick is for them to gain confidence that you are talking with the legit person, and you can be able to share your information. Let me show you guys a bit of how phishing looks like. So this is an example of a phishing email or social engineering email. This comes from PayPal. For example, here they were talking about. Let me open a new tab. Some issues resolving PayPal account. And the good thing is these attackers usually understand what's going on in these um, technologies. For example, at the moment I know PayPal, you have to verify your account um, so that you can be able to continue using your PayPal account. And those are some of the things that they can use to lure you to click on. So these links usually will take you to a different page that looks maybe similar to PayPal, or maybe a website that hosts a lot of worms, viruses, and all. And another one here, this is from Windows. Um, this is a phishing email. So some of the things that you need to look out are the addresses. So, for example, as you can see, this is not PayPal but ePayPal. There's an extra typo around there. Same for Microsoft, and yeah. So check out the addresses. Ensure that they are coming from the correct place or the correct person. Check out Kitambo. People used to look out at the grammar mistakes, but now with all the AI age, it's a bit difficult to be able to distinguish them. Another method is having attachments. These are attachments. This attachment is for Gmail. Looks very similar to Gmail. So once it downloads, you might think this is the actual Gmail page, but as you can see here, it comes. This is hosted from your files. So once you try and enter these details, it will send the details to the attacker, and they'll be captured. Same for Adobe, or sometimes they can add some scripts to the document that they can share with you, that they share with via email, and then the script will perform other things once you have downloaded them. So especially for Windows document, they have macros. So macros are more like source code that you can create. Another one is this for social media. They send you an image. Once you click on an image, it's going to go to your full friends. Send them the same image. Once they um, click on the image, it does the same. Send, send, send to many. Yeah. So let's continue to the next part in our presentation. So we've seen at social engineering whereby attackers trick you into giving up your information, or accessing or revealing sensitive information. SQL injection, on the other hand, um, so whenever you hear injections, this doesn't mean that you have to inject them with the syringe and all, but you inject them with a code. So remember I had showed you guys how an SQL script looks like. So the SQL script is what we use to do the injection. So since we understand how the SQL works, we can be able to add some extra scripts in order to bypass some of the security measures that have been put in place um, to restrict access. Uh, for SQL injection, I'll show you a site which we will use. It's called Mutual. We have been given express permission to play around with it, and it has an SQL injection vulnerability. So we are okay. Let me share this link on the chat. Right. So this is what we are going to use to practice our SQL injection. So ideally, we're going to use SQL injection to bypass the website's authentication mechanism. Right. So as I mentioned, SQL injection um, is a process of adding some scripts in order to bypass the mechanism, or rather the database mechanism. You guys remember when we were talking about selecting all from a certain point? You know, when we're talking about injection, injection is going to bypass that logic. Let me show you guys in a moment. For example, in our script, when we wanted to get all employees, able to get all employees, and if, for example, in these employees, they had a password column as well. So we should be able to see all the passwords. When you sign up to a page, you'll be asked to enter your username. You'll be asked to enter your password. You'll be asked to enter, other details as well. When you sign in, you'll be given a form that has the username, email, and a password. So what the website will be doing once you submit is going to select, um, maybe select all the columns from the employees, whereby, username, say first name, where first name equals the value that you've entered in the form. So choose Nancy. And so this will check for the first name or the username. And then we also going to add another condition, and whereby the password equals to the password that you entered in your input. So let's say password. Right? So let's go through it once more. Um, so once you have registered to a website and you want to log in, behind the scenes, this is what the database will be doing. It will select, all the columns from the table whereby your data is saved. So this could be employees, could be customers, users, and all, whereby the email, the first name, username is, so this Nancy and the password are dynamic content. So these are the content that you input qua form. Sinakuletianga the form over there. So that dynamic data that you put in is what is going to be replaced here inside these quotes. So the database will check where the first name is and then the value. So this is what we call the value. So for example, this will check the database if there's a user whose first name is Nancy. And then, so it will check if there's a username called Nancy, and this is another condition, so they have to be all true. And the password, so it will check the password column. We don't have a password column here in this example, you know, where the password equals to whatever that you have inputted in your input. So for SQL injection, the thing that you always do is to bypass this logic. SQL injection usually bypasses this logic. So for example, if you know we have a user named Nancy, we don't want these other condition to be executed as well. So we look for a way in which we can comment out the rest of the comments. So something like that. So this will just select everything from employees table where the first name is Nancy. Right? So this, since this is going to be true, is going to fetch a user with the word Nancy. Missing operator, I don't know what that means. But yes, so that is usually the purpose or how you can bypass your database using SQL injection. So let's see how we can perform this SQL injection in an actual website. So first step, let's put some random data in the username. I'll put some random username and log in. So behind the scenes, it's going to take whatever I did, whatever content I had here in the username input and the password input, and then it will um, supplement that in the query, a query similar to the one that we've just seen. So select users from, select all from the users table, whereby the username is the username that I put here, and password equals the password that I put here. If they're all okay, then it's going to, return to true, and it's going to um, proceed and take us to the web to another page which has details about yourself. So in order to see if a website is vulnerable to SQL injection, a good test is usually to add um, a quote, a single quote, right? So let's try login. This has a JavaScript validator. So we have to put in the password. I'm just going to type in some random things. All right, so we can see an enter occurred at this. So that means we're able, this site is susceptible to SQL injection. Right. So now we need to have a username. Right, we need a username. So you can enumerate a username from normal places. You can have a list of common username things that are there. There's usually a big payload out there from the internet, and most of the time, Otacosa or a database we want to be, it won't miss a user called maybe an admin, administrator. Yeah, so let's try an admin username. So we try admin, and we also do maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, not found in our system, which is fine. So let's try something else. So admin, um, let's stop it there at a moment. Let's explain something. I'm going to take you back to my SQL editor. So in our case, this is what is happening. So we have select all, let's assume it's an employees table, username equals Nancy. So once we input the data that we input at the input fields will be applied here, and the password will be applied here. So if we want to bypass the whole password checking and all, we can do, so this is admin example. Uh, we have tried that and then it gave us an error. So let's comment out the rest of the passwords or the rest of the SQL commands. So these will result to something like this inside a form. So I'll close it and then I'll comment out the rest of the SQL. So behind the scenes this is going to be read. So I'll close the string and then comment out the rest of the SQL statement that is checking for the password. Here I can do some random things. And then once I click, as you can see, it has logged me in as an admin. Right? Pretty cool, right? So whatever you're striving, whatever you're striving to do is to always ensure that the output that is returned will always um, amount or will always return to true. So all the conditions should always be true. So once you have here, you can perform basically anything. You can transfer funds and all. So this is not a true company; it's a fictional one. But yes, so that is for SQL injection. Um, there are different types of SQL injection. There's a blind SQL injection. There is out of band injection. There's a visible error injection. In our case, that was a visible error because we were able to see um, the errors live on the page. Sometimes you don't have those errors and you have to operate on a blind assumption. Okay. Wrong tab. Let me um, do it again. Yeah, apologies. I'm having a lot of pages and tabs here and there. Okay, okay, okay. I'll redo it. Can you all see the Altera Mutual site? Awesome. So we assume we have a user that is an administrator, right? So we'll be using that for now um, in our use case. So the first thing I'll need to do, I'll need to close the string. So whatever that will be happening, this will close now the username part, right? And then I need to comment out the rest of the SQL statement code. So the string to close the statement, that is to check the username, and then it is going to close and then comment out with hyphen hyphen will comment out the rest of the SQL statement. So it will only perform one. So select all where the username is admin, and then it will ignore the password and all. But since the password is using JavaScript, so I'm gonna type in some random numbers or characters. So once I click on login, it's going to evaluate to true because we have a username called admin, and since we have commented out the rest, the password won't really be checked. So let me click on the login. Yes, as you can see, it has logged me in as the admin user. So as I mentioned, um, with SQL injection, you are targeting to ensure that you have your outcome always returns to true, right? So if even if you don't have a username, you want a way in which the resulting script will return true. So there are some other ways that you can do that. For example, you can use the one equals to one, which always evaluates to true. You can use the yeah, mostly is one equals to one, or um, yeah, one equals to one as a string or as a digit, or a is equals to a. Yeah, but it has to always results to true. Cool. So we have seen social engineering attacks, how people use social engineering to gain access to your credentials so they can be able to log in. We have seen another method that is SQL injection. So now let's look at the last one, which is brute force attack. All right. Brute force attack is a process of trying every single combination on a password until you find the right one. All right. So you're trying all the combinations until you find the right one. So sometimes it takes a lot of processing power to do it. So because you don't really know how many characters um, A password might have, it takes around, for a 5 character, it will take around 3 to 5 seconds to crack it. And it increases the more you increase the number of passwords. In cybersecurity, there's a better way in which people have tried. So there's a collection of usernames and passwords, common usernames and common passwords out there. There are some attackers who have compiled a huge list. You can find a list that's about, up to 2 GB, in terms of sizes of usernames and passwords. So that usually makes it a bit easier, as most users using psychology and social engineering, they use their password and they use common passwords, so that they can be able to remember. Um, in the next segment, we are going to see how to brute force. And for brute forcing, we are going to use an application called Suite, an application called Suite, and which we can going to use to perform brute force attack. We're still going to use the same site. So this is the site we're going to use. We'll try to see how we can do a brute force attack to it. All right. Uh, I'll have to stop sharing and then share my whole page, my whole window, so that you can see how it works. Also introduce Suite briefly, and how it works. Right. So I have my Suite window over here. So Suite is a tool that you can use to intercept. You can use to intercept requests. Modify the request before sending them to the destination where they have to go. So when you open Suite, you'll find these. So this is a community edition, meaning that it is free. You can be able to install and use it for free. However, the problem is, the issue with the community edition is that there'll be some features that won't be accessible to you until you go premium. So this is the dashboard. Over here, the first page will show you a list of tasks that is going on. If you have a site that you are scanning for, it will show up here. At the bottom, we have the log. So this will be logging every site that you visit that is passing through this proxy. This usually is for premium members, and it can show you each of the vulnerability associated with the website that you are scanning. And then at the bottom, this will give you some advisory on the vulnerability that has been identified in that page. We then have the target. So this target will show you all the sites that you have visited. You know, if there's any site that you want to check against here and you want to see if it is being tracked, You can find it under the target or the sitemap. So this proxy is where this under the tab proxy, um, where you can, you know, pause request, modify it, intercept the request, perform some other actions before continuing to send it to its destination. So if you want to intercept a request, you can click under the interceptor is on. I'm going to show you guys in a moment how we can link our website to our proxy or your browser to Burp Suite so that all the requests can be intercepted and then it'll perform some actions before we send it to its destination. The next tab under proxy, we have the intruder. So this intruder is used to perform automated attacks. So when you have a lot of, for example, you want to test against 0 to 100, you can use an intruder to help you automate that process. A repeater is used to, and then the next tab is a repeater, which you can use to perform repeated actions. So, for example, I'm making a request and I want to test it again with some other values. I can use a repeater to quickly repeat the same process without having to start again from the beginning. Yeah, so these are the most part that you will be using. So proxy, intruder, repeater, collaborator. This is a more premium stuff. Sequencer, decoder, comparer. Are not really used unless you dive deep into Backseat. So I'm not going to touch on them. I'm going to touch on these two because those are the ones we're going to have a look at. Right, so the next step is let's see how we can add a proxy so that data from this website can go into it. One moment. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. So at the moment, you should be able to see my BAP suite application, and you should see my browser, which has Ultra Mutual website on. So kindly confirm those are the things that you can see on my screen. Right. If you're not able to see, kindly let me know. Ikiwacha mahali, let me know as well. So in order for me to link my website to Burp Suite, I'm going to add a proxy. So this is the proxy setting. I need to set my proxy to use this interface. So I have a web address and I have a port number. You can see. And then on my browser, I have added an extension called Smart Proxy. So for Smart Proxy, this allows me to add extra proxies. So I'll go to the settings. Let me see where. Under here, I can be able to add a domain or, so edit. I can add a rule. I can match with wildcard, can match the host. I can match with subdomains and all. Since my site is already subscribed, so this is the server for Suite. The server and the port, I've already added them. So I'll go to my website, I'll activate my proxy to always enable, and then I'll just choose all the domains associated with testfire. So let us see if we are able to log data from our website to proxy. So I'll just close these, refresh. Let's go to history. Intercept is on. Let me turn it to off. Okay. Our Nini is not catching interceptors. Let's try the smart proxy and enable that. Refresh. Yes, there we are. We can now see our requests have been able to, we can intercept our request. We can also intercept if a request is on. So, for example, if I do this, um, it allows me to intercept this request. So if there is something that I need to do, I can be able to modify, and then I'll forward the request to its next destination, continue forward, and they can be able to see the results. But I really don't need it. So first things first, I'll just try and put random data, and then I'll capture it. So I'll do admin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and log in. I'll go to the history. So this is the history. This is the information that I've just added. There is actually this post. Yes. So the post method for sending data. You can see my user ID and the password that I just submitted. So under this point, you can click on it and send it to the repeater. So under the repeater tab, if I make a request, I'll just see the same thing that I've seen that is here. So I can render it. So I need to follow the direction. And yes. Uh-huh. Right. So using the repeater, I can be able to modify the request, do some extra things. I can be able to change the method from get to post to put and all. But for if you want to do brute force, I'm going to use the same. I'm going to the history. We use the same request. I'll send it to intruder, and then under the intruder. So this is where now it gets a bit interesting. So what I want to check for, I want to check for the password. All right. So this password is now will be my dynamic content that I will be adding to. Let me clear all, then see. So this is the value that the password should go in. I'm going to add that key over there. So this will tell Babs that this is the dynamic content that you will be checking against. I'll be adding a payload that contains a list of passwords, the list of common passwords that you can use. And then Babsuite is going to go through all those passwords. If it finds a username that works, then it's going to tell us. But it's going to use the username admin. If you don't know the username, you can also add it. So you have one payload with the usernames, another payload with the passwords. But since we know the admin, and just to make these things a bit faster, um, I'll just do with the password for now. All right. So once I have added my mark, so the password, this is now what is going to be the dynamic content, which is going to be tested against. I need to add my payload. So under the payload tab here, hope you all can see where my mouse is up at your payload equal. So you have the positions where we define the positions that we want to use, and then we go to the payloads. All right. Let me see if I can find a payload that we can use. Password list. This is the usernames. Yes. So I'll try and use these passwords. It's going to take a while, so I'll just show you how it's done, and then we'll leave it continue running. So now that I have my list of passwords, so these are the common password names. I'll copy it, and then under here I've selected a simple list. So you can select different types of payloads, starting from custom, um, numbers, dates, null payloads. Yeah. So if you had two positions, we will need to set two positions as well. So one for the username, one for the password, but you only have one. Yep. So let me just paste all the passwords there. Uh, or you can also add individually like that. Cool. So now once you have your payload, you have set the position, I think we can just continue testing out our payloads. So you can configure some settings if you want to, capture some details. For example, if you want to capture the response um, from the API, you can always come and add it here, or you can extract from the page over here. But I really don't want to do that at the moment. So let's click on Start Attack. Okay, and this will show you all the lists as it goes. So it's going to do 100 lists. So the payload, let's click on one and see what happens inside. So it's going to use the admin and then the password that we have used in. Yes, so that is how a brute force attack can be done. So sometimes you might need a bigger password list or bigger password payload in order to perform some of the actions. Yes, I think I'll continue with my presentation as it finishes. Uh, so we have looked at social engineering, we have looked at SQL injection, and we've also seen how to do brute force. So let's see how you can protect yourself. Um, what are some of the methods that you guys use to protect yourself online? What are some of the ways of having a private account from Ashley, a VPN, nice. Regular updates, changing your passwords regularly. Awesome. Awesome. So let's quickly go through some of the things that you can use to protect your online safety. So what's online safety? Online safety is the ability to stay and navigate the online world in a safe and secure manner, without having to reveal or being a victim of some of these attacks. And in order to do that, one of the things you need is a strong password. Um, I want to talk about strong and unique passwords. We are talking about the quality of your passwords. You can check the quality of your passwords under, what is it called? Let's do Bitwarden password check. I think someone have also seen someone on the chat. Uh, there is a password checker. I'll talk a minute about the Bitwarden and how you can use Bitwarden to create strong and secure password, and also how to manage your passwords. So you can check your passwords here. Let me also paste this on the chat. So you can check your password. So for example, an admin, if this is your password, this will take less than a minute to crack. Um, yes. What is another common password? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Less than a second. Admin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Will take 15 seconds. And you can test out your password strength. So at all times, it's advisable to have password um, that has all the characters, that is difficult to crack, and that is also, um, able to remember it well. A good rule of thumb is to have words instead of characters. So, for example, let's say strong, and then I'll mix my password again, caps and small letters, strong password account. Those are just three words, and you can see it has raised my estimate from seconds to centuries. If I also add, words and numbers and signs, becomes very difficult to crack it. So a rule of thumb is to use words that you can easily remember. And a good thing is you can use a password manager. So it is not good to reuse your passwords because if you use your passwords, that means if an attacker can get access to one, you know, account, they can be able to extract the password from that account and then try it against another website. If you use your password, then most likelihood you'll have used your password in your email, your social media sites. I've seen a lot of scenario where people have lost their account, their social media account, IG, Twitter, FB. Yes, I've also lost my Facebook account way back then. Yeah, at that time I wasn't really didn't know about security so much. But yeah, some of these things. So always be cautious when you're navigating the industry. Um, use a password manager so that you don't have to use your password. You just have to remember only one password, and then the rest is going to stop for you. A good thing about Bitwarden is that you can also be able to generate passwords. Let me show you guys how to generate a password. So under generator, you can be able to see um, some of the generated passwords. So when you're creating an account, you can use some of these to have a strong, let's copy this and then see how strong it is. It's gonna take centuries, and it's easy to remember since they are words, and words are easier remembering than characters. Right, let's go back to our online safety. Right, time is not on our side, so I'll be a bit fast. Um, so how strong password? Don't use your password. Make sure they're strong and they're unique. Avoid clicking on suspicious link. If you're not sure of a link, there are some sites that you can use to look at the links. There are some sites that you can use to perform some of the checks. Just check, search. Google is a friend. Uh, there's a site checker that you can use to check if the link is from a good source or from a bad source. Um, Always be aware of enticing offers, especially in game items on social media, because they can be bait and might lead for you to be attacked or share your information. Always ensure that your software are up to date, your phone, your browser, your computer. ensure that you have updated all the latest software, and that so that all the security patches have been fixed. Last but not least, never share your login credentials. Never share your login credentials. If you need to share them, there are ways that you can share them securely. Um, but never share your login credentials, especially on the web, just like that. So to wrap up, today we have gone through a lot of things. I know to we have learned a lot, but just as a recap, we have seen how sites work. We have talked about client and server relationship. We have seen the status codes. We have seen the languages that we use, that is HTML, CSS, JS, and the server side. We have also talked about database, how it stores and retrieves data. We have seen the language that we use to communicate with the database, that is the SQL. We have seen some of its basic structure or syntax, select, from, where. Um, yeah, we've then looked at exploiting, some exploiting. We've talked about three methods in particular: social engineering, whereby attackers, um, you know, trick you into giving your information by clicking on links or site or images. We've also looked at the SQL injection, how we can be able to bypass a website using an injection. And we said the injection usually checks for if the value evaluates to true. I know programmers who are in the house can relate to that. But if you can't, don't worry. Take your time. Look at some SQL injection videos on YouTube. You'll get a better concept and idea about it. Last but not least, we've looked at brute force attack. We've looked at how we can use brute force attack to gain an access, and we have seen that through a tool called the Burp Suite that allows us to automate that process of brute force. Last but not least, we've seen at the online safety. We have talked about how to protect ourselves, and our online identity and data. Um, that brings us an open. I don't know if we have time for Q&A. I know time is really not on our side. Sasha, you're muted.
No, I'm waiting to see if people have questions.
Oh, okay.
Okay, if there are none, we can just proceed because we have just a few minutes to 8 p.m. So thank you so much, Francis, for taking us through today's workshop. I'm sure people have learned a lot and they now have an idea of how to bypass, although I don't want people to be bypassing databases, but for
Yes, it's
anyone who's
control environment.
okay. But I think it's very interesting. It's so, so interesting. I feel like cybersecurity is such an interesting career, honestly. Yeah. So let's see if there
It
are
is.
questions that are coming. Okay, none for now. So let me just proceed, Francis, if you can allow me. But let's
All right.
appreciate Francis on the chat box for the amazing work he has done.